I am very happy you are here with me to join me on the Bandara of my master, great master Hazur Maharaj Baba Sawan Singh Ji, who not only transformed my life, transformed the lives of so many people. I watched the transformation of lives going on. That one man by his presence can do so much. It's amazing. But this was not so unique. If you look back in history, you will notice several examples of this kind. In my mind comes the example of Jalaluddin Rumi, Maulana Room, and his poetry translated into English is now popular even all over the world, including the United States. He was a priest, a Maulvi. Maulana as a Maulvi of a mosque, masjid. And he used to wear a long robes and walk with great stately style, like any Maulvi should. And he had a great grace about his walk. Then one day, a dervish named Shams Tabriz came from Tabriz. And he had a short cloak. He was wearing a short jacket. And he danced round and round. And the jacket was flowing like this. Maulana Room went to hear his talk in the evening. When he heard his talk, next morning he was rotating himself like this, revolving around just like Shams Tabriz. The whole village was surprised. What has happened? How has he turned so crazy? He was such a good priest, such a good Maulvi of that masjid. It did not take more than one evening to transform the Maulana into a disciple of Shams Tabriz and change his life completely. And his best poetry we read today came after that. These kind of things I have heard happen before. These have happened so many times. What is the relationship that is created by these examples? We have a very unique relationship between a disciple and a master. It is based upon pure love, unconditional love, with no judgment whatsoever. It's hard to believe that this exists in this world, that you can find a human being like ourselves who can be so loving that if you love him, he loves you. If you hate him, he loves you. If you kill him, he loves you. There is nothing that will stop the love of a perfect living master for a disciple. It's so unconditional. There's a very strange example that I'm giving you. Great master showed that. And I can never tell you fully what impact it has on me and all the others who associated with him. Just sitting in his presence made so much difference to us. How does that happen? And we wanted to somehow please our master. We wanted the happiness of the master. We wanted that he should not get displeased on anything. Why are we so suddenly changed and interested in a human being who may be just a friend or an enlightened person or somebody who knows more? These things don't happen just with this extra knowledge, but it does happen. I'll tell you the example of another well-known saint in India, Sai Bulle Shah. Bulle Shah wrote Punjabi poetry, and in that he would describe how we are so misled about where to find the truth that we run to mandir and masjid and girja, go to the temples outside and completely forget the temple is inside us. The real temple is we are carrying on our heads all the time. He criticizes those who keep on reading scriptures. And he says they have been reading everything, but they haven't read themselves. They should go inside. And when he happened to meet his Murshid-e-Kamil, perfect living master, Anayatullah Shah, He was so happy. He tried to please Inayatullah in every way. One day, there was a wedding in Bulleh Shah's family. So they invited the master, Inayatullah, to come and join the wedding. Unfortunately, Inayatullah was very busy, so he sent one of his servants, his attendants, that you go and represent me. But when you go there, tell them that I, Inayatullah, could not come and you are there in my place. The servant went to attend the wedding, but when they saw that Inayatullah has not come, but just sent a servant, they said, well, the servant is a servant, and they put him with the other servants and not with the honored guests at all. When the wedding was over, this attendant came back, and Inayatullah asked him, how was the wedding? He said, it was good. Did they give you the honor they would have given me? No, they did. They couldn't have done that. I am not you. I am an attendant. And they put me with the other attendants, with the servants who were placed separately from the honored guests. He said, they should not have done that. This displeased Inayatullah. He said, this should not happen like that. The attendant conveyed this to Bulleh Shah. Bulleh Shah said, my family made a big mistake. I want to apologize. He tried to come and apologize, and the master did not give him even the time to see him. And he cried and he cried, Master, forgive me. And he could not forget that this is displeasing my master. This will never happen, although he was not responsible. Only partly responsible. He could have told the people, this attendant represents my master. But the master did not see him. Some of the most poignant, the best poetry of Bulleh Shah is written in that period, when he could not see his master. Then one day there was a wedding in the master's house. And they arranged some dancing girls to come to entertain the guests, which was normal in those days in weddings, to have entertainment by dancing girls coming and singing. When Bulleh Shah found out, he dressed himself like a woman and joined the dancing girls. And Inayatullah was watching, and he saw the dancing girls dancing very well, and there's one woman who's not dancing the way. So he called Bulleh Shah. He said, are you Bulleh Shah? He said, no, I am Pullah Shah. I am the one who made the mistake. So Inayatullah hugged him and forgave him. He says, Bulleh Shah says, the secret of pleasing the master is to dance in front of him. The Sufis have been following that tradition. And they say that the dancing is an expression of your love and devotion. You are willing to do anything to please the master. These are great examples of what relationship we can create with a master. It's not an ordinary relationship of a teacher and a student at all. It's the truest form of a love affair that I can think of. So that is why these are amazing stories. I could tell you so many other stories of great master, how his disciples were so affected by him. I'll tell you the story of one of my good friends, Dr. Ishwar Singh. He was a veterinary doctor, animal doctor, and he lived in Kapurthala, a princely town about 20 miles away from the Dera where Great Master was doing his work. This was very early on, and the Great Master had just been appointed as a master by his master, Baba Jaimal Singh. And Ishwar Singh was very keen on finding a perfect master. Every holy person who came, every Swami who came, Every yogi who came, he would discuss things with him, but never felt fully satisfied. He tried so many methods of yoga. It didn't satisfy him. In his neighborhood lived a few Muslim disciples of Great Master. Some of the earliest disciples of Great Master were Muslims, though he belonged to the Sikh faith. Because it has to be understood the spiritual path is not religion at all. It's open to all religions equally. It's open to all human beings who are seeking the truth. The first few Muslim disciples of Great Master were neighbors of Dr. Ishwar Singh. And in talking to them, he said, I am looking for something. They said, there is a Murshid-e-Kamil, a perfect living master, living just a few miles, 20 miles away from here. There is a river flowing called the Beas River, and he has a small little hut. His master had only small hut with 2 rooms in it, and the master has passed away, and Baba Sawan Singh has now taken over. He is a perfect master. He is our master. You go and get initiated from him. You will get the real thing. So he said, okay, I'll go and find out. He took his bicycle. He used to travel a lot on bicycle. He took his bicycle and checked out where the river Beas is and went along the Beas River. He was told that the master's dera, or the place where he lives, is about 3 miles downstream. So he was going in the evening after his work, and 3 miles passed, 6 miles passed, 9 miles passed, there was no dera, nobody was there. It got very dark. So when he reached a place where there was a bridge over the river, not a bridge, actually ferry bridge. A ferry used to run and carry people, because there was one village on the other side of the river which was only accessible through ferry. So he met the ferryman. He said, I have been looking for a dera of one Baba Sawan Singh and I can't see it anywhere. He said, you are on the wrong side of the river. The dera is on the other side. It's only 3 miles downstream. He says, can you take me across so that I'll now go up along the river and go and find the dera? The ferryman said, there is no pathway. There is no road. It's all forest. It's all dense forest. So you can't even take your bike there. He said, doesn't matter. I'll carry my bike on my head, but I have to go and see this man. My neighbors told me he's a perfect master. I've never seen a perfect master. Ultimately, he persuaded the ferryman to ferry him across the river. And the ferryman took him, and Ishwar Singh could not find a pathway, trying to keep close to the river, carrying his bicycle on his head. He trudged along, sometimes losing his way, sometimes getting close to the river. Early morning, he reached where he found the 2 huts, which was where Baba Sawan Singh was living. As it happened, Baba Sawan Singh also has an attendant, a lady whose name was Bibi Rukko. Bibi was just a short for addressing a lady. So, Bibi Rukko had worked and served Baba Jaimal Singh. Not only that, she was an initiate of Seth Shivdayal Singh Swamiji of Agra, who was also the master of Baba Jaimal Singh. So she was a very veteran satsangi. She had been with 3 masters, Swamiji, Baba Jaimal Singh, and Baba Sawan Singh. So when he knocked at the door, this Bibi opened the door and says, what the hell are you doing at this early hour of the morning? He said, I have come to see Baba Sawan Singh. And she used the most abusive language and got so angry with him that this is the time early morning to disturb a master? Go away. He thought to himself, I have heard this Bibi has been with 3 masters. If she can't control her anger, what will I get from this master? He is not a master. He found out this cannot be a line of masters at all. Because the woman who has been with 3 masters for so long can't lose her give up her anger and loses temper so easily. This could not be a master at all. So he went back. In the morning he told his neighbors, you were wrong. Baba Sawant Singh is not a master. I saw that Bibi and she was so angry, and you told me she has been with 3 masters. If 3 masters could not change even a simple thing like her anger, how can these be masters? And they laughed at him. And he said, did you go to see the Bibi or did you go to see the master? He said, went to see the master. They said, but you never saw the master. He played a trick on you. Instead of seeing you, he was testing you. He put the Bibi in front of you to see what your seeking is like. You are not a good seeker. You came away empty-handed because you never went to where you wanted to go. He said, does master play tricks like this also? Oh, this is a very mischievous master. He can play any kind of games. They said, he is a human being with a great sense of humor. And all the perfectly masters have a great sense of humor. And we can't even understand how they can have such a great sense of humor. But when we go within our own self, we discover if you look upon this created world like a show, you will have the same sense of humor. They are able to see the world in a very different way. He said, I'll go again now. Now I know where the dera is, where master lives. So next time I'll go, I know where I have to go. And he found out that Baba Sawant Singh was not living there all the time. He was working in the military engineering service at a far-off distant place, and he would only come on weekends. And he would give a discourse on Saturday evening at 5 o'clock and go back to work on Sunday. It's a long journey he had to take. So most of the people attended his discourse only on Saturday evening. So he told one of his clients, his customers, who owned land there, that you are the landowner of that place, and there is a hut next to your land on the river, and can you come along, we'll go and see this master there. The landowner, the chief, said, sorry, I am not going to go there. He said, why not? He said, I hear there's a white-bearded man who comes there, and whoever goes there never comes back. I am not going to take that risk. He said, come on, chief, we just have to go and see him. We can see him from a distance. Come on, take your horse out and we'll go. Chief said, I'll go with you to my land, but I will not go and see this man. They said, doesn't matter. So they both took their horses and went to the chief's land, and at the edge of the land was that hut. When they reached there, the chief said, stand at a distance. I don't want to go near that man. So they got off from their horses and stood in front and saw Great Master giving a discourse. About 20 people were sitting in front of him. And he had a book in his hand. And he would recite something, some verses from the book. Then he would put the book down and explain what he has just read. Interpret what he was reading. They saw that. When Great Master left the book once and saw those 2 people standing there, he beckoned to them, come here, like this with the hand. So the chief said, he's calling you. He said, no, he doesn't even know me, he knows you. He's calling you. He said, not me. They said, let us separate and see who is calling. The chief went on one side, and Ishwar Singh went on the other side, and Great Master looked both sides, and he looked towards Ishwar Singh and called him. So Ishwar Singh went there and sat at the back. Great Master picked up the book and saw Ishwar Singh sitting at the back, put the book down, said, "Come and sit in front." So Ishwar Singh got up and sat right in front of Great Master. And Great Master began to continue his discourse from the book. As Ishwar Singh heard that discourse for the first time, tears came into his eyes. He said, "This is the whole thing I was looking for. He is a master, but he doesn't have the knowledge. The whole knowledge is the book he is holding in his hand. That's where he's getting all the knowledge from." When the discourse was over, he got up. "Master, I have a little request for you." Great Master said, "Yes, what is it?" "Can you give that book to me which you have in your hand?" Great Master said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't give this book." Ishwar Singh said, "I have 75 rupees in my pocket," which was a lot of money in those days. "Can I give you 75 rupees if you can give me that book?" He said, "Even if you gave me 1,000,000 rupees, I will not give you the book." He got convinced. This is the whole secret of his teaching. He has a secret book containing all the knowledge. He said, "Master, can you give me the book for 1 week? Next week when you come back, I'll give it back to you." He said, "No, several times during the week I have to read the book." "Master, will you give me the book for tonight? I'll read it outside your hut and give it back to you in the morning." Great Master said, "I'm sorry, I sometimes get up in the middle of the night to read the book." He said, "What kind of master are you? So greedy about the book of knowledge that you have?" He said, "Yes, the book is very important for me." Ishwar Singh went disappointed and told his neighbors that he has a book in his hand, and I saw the title of the book, and he won't give me for 1,000,000 rupees. He said, "What was the title of the book?" He said, "Sar Bachan." The book's title was Sar Bachan, the true words. True words. He said, "That's what I realized is Sar Bachan." They laughed. They said, "The Sar Bachan book is available for 2 rupees in the market." There's nothing special about it. Great Master again played a trick on you. Now, Ishwar Singh told me that had he given the book to me, I would never have gone back to him. I was so convinced that the whole secret lay in the book. And he played really a big game with me by not giving me the book. He said, "Now I'll go again." He goes again to Great Master. And this time, he's going in the evening after work on a Saturday. Great Master finished his discourse sitting on a chair. And he says, "Master, I know what you did to me. I have now heard your satsangs from my friends who live next to me. They are your disciples. I know the important thing is to get Naam from you, initiation from you. Please give me Naam, give me initiation." Great Master said, "Have you broken your arm?" He said, "Is that a requirement for getting initiation?" He said, "No." Great Master said, "Not a requirement. It just so happens that in your destiny, the time for initiation will come when you have broken your arm and healed it. You come back after your arm is broken and it is healed, I'll initiate you." I said, "Master, this is something very strange I never heard. Why would I break my arm?" He said, "Don't you ride horses? You can fall from a horse." He said, "I have been riding horses all my life. I never fell from horses." He said, "Sometime one can fall also." And disappointed again, Ishwar Singh went back to his house. And when he reached his house, his wife, whose name was Maya, she said, "Where have you been all day?" "The prince, the ruler of Kapurthala state, has been calling you all day." And I kept on saying, "I don't know where he is, where he is. Well, run to the palace. He's calling you." Ishwar Singh said, "Maybe some animal of his, some elephant, some camel, some horse has gone sick. Therefore he's calling me." When he went there, the prince was sitting on his throne and said, "Where have you been?" He said, "I went to see one Maharaj Ji," because he used to call great master Maharaj Ji. And the king said, "There is no Maharaj Ji, I am the Maharaj. Tell me, why did you delay your coming? I had something special for you." He said, "Yes, what can I do for you?" He said, "Only this morning, 2 new horses, Arabian steeds, have come. And I have told my courtiers, everybody, I will only inaugurate and ride on these when Ishwar Singh comes. We'll both ride together. So I am waiting since morning for you. Now bring the horses and we'll both ride. And that will be the inauguration of our new 2 horses from Arabia." Ishwar Singh said, "Excuse me, I will not ride that horse." He said, "What has happened to you? Every day you ride." "No, that sage told me if I fall from a horse, I'll break my arm." He said, "Are you so stupid to believe these superstitions? Somebody tell you the superstition and you start believing it?" He said, "I don't know the way he said it. There was something about it. Please forgive me. Not today. I don't want to ride this horse." The prince said, "Okay, first saving my face. We'll both get onto the horse. I'll ride away, you can get off." He said, "That I can do." So the prince got on his horse. As soon as Ishwar got on his horse, the horse limped forward. There was a stone in front on which he didn't know the horse was new. He tripped over it, fell. Ishwar Singh fell under the horse, multiple fracture of his right arm. He said, "That saint knows everything." He's teaching me in a very bad way, but still I know he knows things. He had to get a plaster, his shoulder, the whole thing got calcified and he could not even move his arm. Instead of 3 weeks, 6 weeks, it took a longer time to remove the plaster. When it got off, he found his arm and all had calcification, so it was all completely jammed. He went back to Great Master. "Master, I broke my arm and I have healed, I have come back, I have removed the plaster." Great Master said, "Raise your right hand to your ear." He said, "Master, I can't do it." He said, "Sorry, you can't be initiated." "Master, every time you introduce some new condition, when did you make this new condition? You didn't tell me that you have to raise your right arm to your ear to get initiation." Great Master said, "No, I didn't say. I didn't tell you this. I said, when you break your arm and get healed, then come to me. You haven't healed." He says, "Master, how can I heal? This is like stone now. This is calcification, this stone." Great Master said, "When your horse breaks his leg, do you shoot him or you cure him?" He said, "I try to cure him." If a horse has a fracture of the leg, what do you do if they get a calcification? He said, "I use very strong acid, nitric acid, hydrochloric acid. I combine very strong acids and it dissolves, but so painful. The horse kicks the ground and makes a hole in it." Great Master said, "Why don't you try it?" He said, "Master, I'll kill myself." No, you can dilute it a little. Go back, dilute it a little and you'll get all right." Ishwar Singh went, he gave the treatment, he was able to move his hand, he came, got initiated. Imagine what that man had to go through to get initiation. What a great opportunity we have how we got initiated without breaking our arms, without falling from horses. We don't sometimes realize what a big gift we have got without paying any obvious price for it. People have paid big prices to get initiated. Ishwar Singh made good progress in meditation. He fell in love because of these incidents that happened. Not very pleasant, yet they were incidents that were creating more and more love in his heart. I spent a lot of time with him, with Ishwar Singh. I loved him myself. When I used to introduce him to my friends, they would think he is a mystic, he is a master. He was so beautiful. Ishwar Singh said, "What can I do for my dad? If I can take my dad to see the master, I know he'll be blessed." But the dad was a very orthodox Sikh, following the Sikh tradition that after the 10th Guru, the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, the holy Granth, the book, is the Guru forever. There will be no human being to be a Guru. He believed in it. And he was very strongly believing in it. So when his son would tell him, "Look, there's a perfect master. The very description that you have of a Satguru in this Granth, you will find a man with the same description." He would tell him, "Dad, don't forget, all the Sikh Gurus were human beings. None of them ever said that a book can be a Guru. In fact, the Guru Granth Sahib itself says that by reading any books you can't get anything, even if you read all your life." And he quoted from the Guru Granth Sahib. Father said, "I am not convinced about it. I cannot accept a human being as a Guru anymore." So he said, "If I can take my dad to see the master once, I know he'll be affected like I was affected by him. But he won't go." So one day, the great master was going to travel by train to another station. And he said to his dad, "Dad, would you like to come along with me? I have some work with the station master, the station superintendent there. And we can ride together. I'll spend a few minutes with the station superintendent. And then we'll come back." Dad said, "Okay, we'll go up to the railroad station." So they both went. And Ishwar Singh said, "Dad, will you hold my horse? I'll just go and see the station master and come back." He said, "Okay." So Dad was with his horse and Ishwar Singh's horse. Both he held reins. And Ishwar Singh ran down the platform. And if some of you might have seen the Byas railway station, you have to go down little bit slope, and then the platform comes there. Great Master was waiting there for the train to come. And he ran to Great Master. "Master, I brought my dad. Bapu is right up there. My dad is right there. Please come and give him darshan. There is still 10 minutes to the train." Great Master said, "Certainly." And they are both running up. And I remember the scene. How could they be running up? His white beard flapping around with Ishwar Singh running. And they're running up to see. The dad suspected there is some trick going on. And he left Ishwar Singh's horse there and he left. So when they went up, there was no dad. Great Master said, "Sorry, your dad could not come. It was not his time." Ishwar Singh felt very disappointed. He said, "There has to be some way. I just want my dad to see the Great Master." Then he thought of a novel trick, which I tell all of you don't follow. Early morning, Dad was sleeping on his bed, which we call charpoy. It's a very light bed, made of bamboos and some strings tied up. He brought a long rope and he tied his dad up. He was a strong man. He had hired a horse garage which was waiting outside early morning. He tied his dad up, carried the dad on the bed, outside. And Dad said, "What are you doing to me?" "I am taking you to my master." He said, "What a mad man you are. Do you think like this by carrying a person forcibly, I'll accept your master? There's no way I can accept him." And he shouted and cried, and he put him on the horse cart and tied up further. And Dad cried so loudly that all the neighbors came out. Ishwar Singh, "What is happening?" Dad said, "He is a madman." Ishwar Singh says, "He's turned crazy. I'm taking him to the mental hospital." They said, "Take him quickly." And there's a strange sight of a man shouting, tied up on a horse cart, arriving at the Dera to see the great master. And great master sitting on a chair. When this strange scene is coming in front of him, Ishwar Singh on a horse, and his dad tied up on a horse cart, and he brings them there. Great master gets up. He says, "What is this, Ishwar Singh?" He said, "I brought my dad to have your darshan." "Is this the way to treat your father? Do you have no respect? Are you mad?" And the father said, "That's what I have been telling him. He is mad." Great master said, "The old man is injured with the rope that you tied around him. Untie the ropes." Told the sevadars around him, "Take the old man inside. Put some balm where he is injured. This madman doesn't know how to treat his father." So they took Ishwar Singh's dad inside, and Ishwar Singh is waiting. What is going to happen? Then great master comes out. Like this, he says, "Ishwar Singh, come after 3 days. Leave your dad here." He said, 3 days? Ishwar Singh thought, 3 months is not enough to convince my dad. What will happen in 3 days? He goes away. After 3 days, Ishwar Singh returns, and he finds great master sitting on his chair, his dad standing in front of him with hands folded. He rubbed his eyes to see if it's a real scene or not. And as he got up from his horse, the horse dirtied that place. And so Ishwar Singh's dad took off his shirt to clean the place. He says, "In front of a perfect master, you are dirtying this place with your horse. Are you mad?" He said, "Is that you, Dad?" He says, "You have no idea. You never told me. He is a Param Sant Satguru. I discovered in 3 days. I am so lucky. Only this morning I got initiated from him." True story of that Ishwar Singh. There are many stories I could keep telling. I'm only telling you the relationship. It's so unique between a disciple and a master. Ishwar Singh spent much time with me. I got a job in the Indian civil service, and in a later stage I became Chief Secretary of the state government. It was a good job, but very busy job. Ishwar Singh would come to see me, and I was always very busy, but I would always love to see him. He would wait outside the door. I didn't like that. Such a good man, such a great satsangi, such a great, beautiful disciple of great master. But I couldn't help it. So I would call him in whenever I could. All the orderlies and other staff members, my PAs and private secretaries, they also got fed up of him. That why is he coming all the time? They somehow reported it to my wife. They said, "This man, Ishwar Singh, he may be a great friend of the family, but he comes, disturbs the boss in the office. Please stop him." So my wife scolded me. She would have scolded Ishwar Singh. She scolded me, "Why do you let this happen?" So Ishwar Singh said, "Okay, I will go to the house and meet you there." So he began to come to the house. And my wife would scold him. "My husband has just come after all day's work, so tired, and I know you were sitting outside his office there, now you come home also?" Ishwar Singh said, "No, Bibi, forgive me, just want to spend a few minutes with him. Go away." I felt very sad. But being a henpecked husband, I couldn't say anything to my wife. But I did feel sad. I'm telling you true stories today. And this is not an April Fool's joke. Ishwar Singh found out that my wife loves tea with pakoras. Pakoras, you know, Indian snack, salty snack. So what he decided then was to go to the house before I would come. And he would knock at the door with some hot pakoras. Bibi, nice hot pakoras for you. Come in, Ishwar Singh. And by the time I would reach home, they were having tea and I would join them. Such a beautiful time we had. Before he died, he said some very beautiful words to me. He said, "Asi Guru nu pachhaniya nahi." We haven't recognized the Master. We have always thought he's a master. We always thought he's a teacher. No. He was Yar pehla, Guru baad mein. He was a friend first and Guru afterwards, Master afterwards. We forget this part. That a master comes with love, like a friend. He's a friend first, master afterwards. Those who are masters first and not friends at all are teachers. There are thousands of them. Perhaps in this globe, millions of them. But these are rare. These are very rare people who are friends first and masters afterwards. Their mastery is through their love and friendship. That is why these are beautiful words. And I can remember how great Master, with great age difference between us, treated me like himself, treated me like a friend, played games with me. I once cheated on a toll booth. I had to pay a toll to carry my bike over a bridge, and I went to the river and did not pay toll. I told him I cheated the government of one rupee. He said, "Very good, cheat again." I mean, it was very strange relationship. A master is something else. I can tell you, there is no description for a master. I am telling you these stories, and there are endless stories one could keep on telling, that the relationship of a disciple and a master is very different from the relationship of a teacher and a student. Our mind wants teachers, not masters. Our mind is happy if somebody can teach us. And most gurus and masters, guru is supposed to be teacher. So they are teachers. They call themselves masters. But what mastery is it except learned things? This is not the real thing. You have told you many times the story, I don't mind repeating it, of King Janak. King Janak was also ruler of India. And he was searching for a master, searching for truth. He wanted real knowledge, not book knowledge. He told his advisors, his courtiers and his ministers, "I want to have some real knowledge of the self and of the spiritual truth." They said, "King, you are in a very lucky place. You are living in India. We have thousands of masters here. We have thousands of yogis, swamis, gurus. Just have a nice yagna, have a nice feast, holy feast. They all love holy feasts. They will all come." So by beat of drum, announcement was made that the king is in search of a master who can tell him, give him real knowledge. So many swamis and yogis and people came, some in saffron-colored robes, some white-colored, some without robes. They all assembled. And he set up in his compound of the palace some tents where they could sit and discuss things. And he disguised himself as an ordinary person, like a tourist. He put on ordinary clothes and walked among them so he could hear them and see if they have knowledge. He was so surprised. They were carrying scriptures with them, or whatever they believed in, were citing those scriptures, like they had learned many of the verses by heart, and they were challenging the other gurus that their interpretation was correct and not the others. Some were even coming to blows on the interpretation of the same books they are holding in their hands. He said, these people may be learned people, but knowledgeable people. I don't want this kind of knowledge. Books I can read myself. I want real knowledge. They don't have real knowledge. He was very disappointed. And he went back to his palace and he called his advisors and ministers and he said, these people are learned people. They memorize the books. They can recite the books. And they interpret differently. They don't have any idea of real knowledge. These are words they keep on speaking. Words cannot be knowledge. Knowledge is something much more than that. I want real knowledge, not this kind of knowledge. They said, King, this was a very short one-day program you had. You should have a big feast. 7 days feast, so that you can call people from all over the country. He said, all right, organize that. So a 7-day feast was organized, and these yogis, swamis, rishis, munis, they all turned up with all their own different costumes and with different scriptures and books in their hands and with beads and malas and whatnot. They all assembled. He had a bigger tentage set up for them. And again he disguised himself as an ordinary tourist and he went. This was merely a repeat, 7-fold repeat of the old experience. They were learned people. They were depending on their books. They were depending upon what they had read. They had depended upon their ego was so high. I know more than you. Each one was telling each other. He said, they have no knowledge, real knowledge at all. This is not what I am looking for. So he got disappointed again, came back to the palace. He told his minister, this is not what I want. I want real knowledge. And I want instant knowledge, not this kind of knowledge. They said, King, if you want that kind of knowledge, there is one perfect master. He lives on the bank of the river, but he will not come to your feast. You have to go and invite him yourself. He said, certainly, why didn't you tell me first? I will go. So he went and met the perfect master whose name was Ashtabakar. Ashta means 8. Ashtabakar was 8 folds he had. He was hunchback and there were 8 folds on his back. So his body was deformed, but his eyes were sharp. That face was beautiful. So the king saw him and Ashtabakar got up. The king was with his revenue and guards and all. He said, King, what brings you to my little hut here? And the king said, I have not come as a king, I have come as a beggar to get true knowledge from you, real knowledge. He said, if you have come all the way to invite me, I'll certainly come. Come to my palace. And I'll arrange that other people who are courtiers, my other nobles, other princes of neighboring states, I'll call all of them to listen to you. He said, certainly I will come. So on the appointed day, Ashtabakar arrives at the palace of King Janak. And King Janak had 2 chairs placed on the stage, on the dais, one for himself, one for the master. When Ashtabakar entered the hall, people saw a hunchback moving with slow pace, with a stick in his hand, and walking slowly. They said, there's royalty sitting there, nobility sitting there. What kind of man had the king invited to give real knowledge? And he's invited all of us to listen to this man? So there was a little murmur going on in the audience. When Ashtabakar reached there, sat on the chair next to the king, he said, King, what is the price of leather today? The king said, Master, what is the price of leather to do? I requested you to come and give us real knowledge. He said, are these not leather merchants sitting here? They said, no, these are royalty, nobility. I have invited them to listen to you. He said, the way they looked at my skin, I thought maybe they deal with leather. So the audience realized he has a sense of humor. So they began to listen to him. He said, King, what kind of knowledge do you want? The king said, I want real knowledge, instant knowledge. By the way, when I hear this story, I always think the king was an American in a past life. Instant knowledge, instant coffee, everything instant. Ashtabakar said, if you want that kind of knowledge, you have to pay the price for it. The king said, any price you ask for. My whole coffers are open, my treasury is open. Quote the price, I will give it to you. Ashtabakar said, I want 3 things. King said, you can have 10, 12, whatever you want. No, only 3 things. Give me your wealth, give me your body, give me your mind. When you have given these 3 things, I will give you instant knowledge. This was a very strange price tag for the king. But he was a very keen seeker. He said, worthwhile. He said, Master, my body is yours. All my wealth is yours. My mind is also yours. Give me knowledge. Ashtabakar said, are you sure you have given these to me? Yes, Master. These are yours now. Okay, let's start with the body. If it is my body, I can keep it where I like. Of course, Master. Pick up this body that you are wearing as King Janak and go and place it on the shoes I left at the entrance to this auditorium. King thought it's very odd, but he has given the body. So he began to walk toward the door of the auditorium. And now all the nobility said, what foolish scene we have come to see here. The king, with all the kingdom and so rich man, he is going out just because a hunchback is telling him, go sit on the shoes. Is this knowledge? The king thought, these people don't know what I am seeking. They just think of my wealth and my palaces and my treasury. Therefore, they are trying to make this kind of comment. When this thought came to him, Ashtabakar shouted from the stage, King, you have no business to think of that wealth. It is no longer yours. You already given it to me. And the king said, oh my God, I forgot. That's not mine at all. I have given it to him. And Ashtabakar shouted, you can't even think about whether you've given it or not because you've given your mind to me. I can't even think. And he put his hands like this on his head. I can't even think. Mind is his. That time, got enlightened. Ashtabakar said, need not sit on his shoes, come back. And the king came back. He said, did you get the knowledge that you're looking for? King said, yes, I did. In the beginning, when he said, I want instant knowledge, Ashtabakar had said, define instant. And the king had said, an instant is when I jump on the horse, put my foot in the stirrup and jump on the saddle, that's an instant. Ashtabakar said, was it in an instant that you defined? It was less than an instant, Master. Ashtabakar said, I don't need your body. I am dealing with my own crooked body myself. I don't need your wealth. I am very happy with what I have. And certainly I don't need your mind. I am dealing with my own mind. I return these to you. But from today, remember, they belong to Ashtabakar and given back to you for use. If you use your body, use your wealth, use your mind appropriately, knowing all the time they belong to the Master, you will make progress and get the same real knowledge in about 20 years of meditation. This is a strange story, but it shows the secret lies in the mind. If the mind does not come in the way, we can be enlightened instantly. Those of you who meditate know about it, that nothing comes in our way of getting knowledge inside except our mind distracting us all the time. Our mind pulls us outside. Mind fights with us. It's a very strange fight. And then we get into a fighting mood ourselves. We are keen to meditate. The mind comes in the way. So we fight with the mind. We say, mind takes us to some other thought. Mind reminds us, did you leave the keys in the car? Did you take them out? Oh, I forgot my keys. Mind, stop, I don't want to think of the keys. Okay, then do you remember what you ate in the morning? Mind is going on constantly, bringing one thought after another, and we keep on challenging it and stop this, and you move on to the next. 2.5 hours we are trying with this struggle. Body is tired, mind is tired. 2.5 hours meditation, terrible state. Is this meditation? What did we achieve? Do you know that we were thinking we are winning every battle? The mind was distracting us and we pushed it aside. Mind came again, we pushed it aside. Every battle we won, but the mind won the war. The mind won the war by engaging us in battle all the time. We got nothing. It's a daily experience. People have this experience. They share with me. Mind doesn't let us meditate, and this is all we do. Meditation should be such a refreshing thing. Should be something that elevates us, something that makes us smile all the time, something that gives us a happiness and a joy and bliss that can't be found outside. What is actually happening? We are struggling, fighting, and at the end, the meditation exercise is the most fatiguing exercise we are doing, just because of the mind. Then people ask me, what is the solution then? Solution is simple. Don't fight with the mind. It's not worth it. Ignore the mind. That's a different kind of practice, by the way. Ignore the mind. You stick to what you want to do and let the mind think what it likes. Say, I don't care. No argument. When we have an argument in our head between the self and the mind wins. Mind wants to engage us in argument, he wins. But if we ignore the mind and stick to what we are doing, mind can keep on the side thinking what it likes. Keep on thinking. I'm not bothered. That's the way to do it. Ignoring the mind is a great art, and one has to take a little time to learn it. How do we ignore the mind? I tell you that. We have two types of will. We have a mental will and we have a spiritual will. The spiritual will comes from the soul. Mental will comes from the mind. We are the soul, not the mind. But we are constantly using mental will as if it is our will. We are constantly mentally thinking of things and then enforcing, acting upon what we think is our will, which is really mind's will, it's mental will. We have learned this all our life. So we are used to it. We are not used to using something different than the mental will. But if you want to meditate, learn the difference between the mind and yourself. Experience the love of the Master. Good meditation starts with a conversation, with a loving, devoted way with your Master first. Then using any other methods, including repetition of words or Simran, listening to sound, or any other form of control that you want to use on the distraction of the mind should come after that. If you start with feelings of love, that which comes from love is your spiritual will, not mental. Therefore, you start with your spiritual will. Then, if you keep up with that, you can learn to stay with the Master's image in front of you and do these things as if the Master and you both are doing it. Both of you can repeat Simran. Both of you can listen to sound. Both of you can have a conversation on what you are doing. Mind keeps on thinking, you can ignore it. It's a practical tip I am giving you after practice, that this works. But people say, we have been using mental will all our life. Is there any easy way to develop spiritual will? The intuitive self is also spiritual will. When intuition speaks in us, not thought, that's also spiritual will. Therefore, intuition, the gut feeling that you have, follow gut feelings generally in your life and spiritual will develop. But the best way for us, so afflicted by this ailment of always listening to the mind, always thinking mental will is our will, we can do one more thing. Every now and then, when the mind wants something very badly, I have to do this, say no. Now, once you say no, hold on to that no, no matter what. Not all the time. I can tell you, if you do it 2 or 3 times a week, as little as that when when the mind wants something very badly, you say no, the mind says, I want it, you say no, the no is not coming from the mind, but from your spiritual will. And you can develop a spiritual will. You will find that the whole system that was set up in consciousness was designed like that you have been given a mind to use. The mind was not there to use you. But what is happening is, the mind has started using us. We must reverse this. To start with, to understand that you are not the mind, you can do another small exercise. And that is, sit quietly and be still in the third eye center, behind the eyes, between the ears. Imagine you are sitting there quietly, not thinking, but just sitting quietly. If you sit quietly there, mind is still thinking. Then you will hear the words of the mind coming in front of you without your trying to think. Mind will never stop thinking, therefore you can hear your mind or see pictures being made of your mind. Sit, smile, smile. Smile inside to show you are not the part of the thinking process. And listen to the mind. If you don't identify yourself with the mind and don't say, I am thinking, it will be a great exercise. I am not thinking, the mind is thinking, I am watching it. Pull yourself to the center of your head, the third eye center. The mind will be speaking in front of you. Listen to the mind. Don't guide it what to think. Don't tell anything. Be quiet yourself and let the mind speak. When you do that exercise, you will find the mind coming with the most bizarre thoughts. You will be entertained. You will smile even more. Try it out. The mind is a continuous thinker, pulling up things from memories, pulling out things from ideas that have been planted into it, and so on. It's nice to watch it. If you can begin to watch your mind as a practice for 15-20 minutes a day, you will discover you are never the mind. You are not the mind. You are the one that observes the mind, the one that uses the mind to think. Then you are in the right place. You have been given a great computer-like stuff in consciousness, a thinking mind. Use it to think what you want it to think, not what the mind wants to think. This distinction between yourself and the mind is very important. Because then you can develop a spiritual will, and when the mind wants something, to be able to say no and stick to it, mind will press you only one time, only now, no. Try it out. Your spiritual will grow. In a few months you will find that you are now telling the mind what to think, what to do, and not mind is advising you all the time, now let's do this, this is my thoughts, I am thinking. This spiritual path is very simple in a way that we have to understand we are not the body, we are wearing it for a short while. We are not sense perceptions, they are also for a temporary time. We are not even the mind, it's given to us. These are three things we are given to us to use. These are three beautiful things given to us to create beautiful experiences. Just use them. Use the body, use your sense perceptions, use your mind as you like. Use it with your spiritual will. Use it any way you like. Use it in any direction you like. But don't become these things. What has happened, the blunder we have made is only simple this. We have identified ourselves with these things that were given to us to use. We have identified ourselves with the body. No, this body is the only thing. I am the body. Oh, mind is just a function of the brain, part of the body. And all these thoughts are nothing but part of the body. Oh, I only see, I have got eyes, therefore I see. Oh, sense perceptions are a biological anatomy of the body. We have been so convinced that we are identifying ourselves with something so temporary, and yet at the same time, we go to our religious places. Soul is immortal, is never born, never dies, but we are body. Then which soul are you talking about? You are not the body. You are not sense perception, they are addition. That's an astral form of body. Some people think astral body must be composed of some kind of fine matter. There is no matter. Some wrong statements have been made, I notice, that astral body has fine matter. Then the finer matter is only physical. The matter as we know it, the matter consisting of atoms and molecules, and this is only physical body. And when we are in the physical body, the experience around us becomes physical. It's not that the physical experience, we are just coming here to see the physical experience. Experience is generated and becomes physical experience so long as we sit in the physical body. When you withdraw your attention or die, physical death or withdrawal, dying while living, the creation changes. What you were changes the creation around you. The astral world is nothing more but the same creation from an astral body. The causal world is nothing but the same creation from a causal body you're wearing. These are different ways that we have come to experience a variety of experiences which we have generated from our consciousness. It's an amazing miracle that we are doing it. But to get caught up, oh, this experience is more real, we just come temporarily, we are only a body, one day we'll die, we don't know where we'll be. Why put yourself in that state at all? Find out the answer now. What a great opportunity that Perfect Living Masters have come to tell us a way to find the answer right now, while we are in the body sitting here, to find out that the body is not us, to find out this has been given to us just for the physical experience, to have a physical experience, which is wonderful. If you take this experience as a generated experience for your entertainment, you'll be very happy all the time. If you take it, this is my life, my karma, I have got trapped into it, you'll be suffering. A simple change of attitude that becomes alive when you actually find out the truth inside. It's worthwhile. I can tell you, you want to enjoy physical life? Go inside, look who you are, and then enjoy physical life. You'll be happy all the time. You see it as drama. It is no more than a drama. We are going and seeing plays otherwise on the stage. We are going and seeing movies and enjoying them. And we can't enjoy this movie? What's wrong with it? Only thing is, just because we are sitting so close to the screen, so close to the stage, we are taking it as more real than a movie. That should not be making a difference from where we watch. Somebody has a front seat in the theatre, somebody sitting at the back. They are seeing the same theatre. They don't become part of the actors. Therefore, depending upon where you are sitting, does not make a difference to the theatre. This is a great show going on. It just so happens that you wanted to be so close to watch it that you decided to be as close as possible and get into the head of one of the characters who is acting there, and now you are watching from inside the head of that character. And all the other characters look like as real as you. You are a character, others are a character. But you are not the character. You are sitting inside the character watching the show. Why not check it out? By simple process, go sit inside and see how you watch. I tell you, if you do this simple trick, I am not talking of all the way going 5 stages to Sachkhand or to a true home, I am talking of the very first step. If you can practice sitting behind your eyes, realizing you are sitting inside one character in this drama. You are not, the actor is not watching the drama. Actor is participating in the drama. You are watching from inside. Your chair from where you are watching this show is inside the head where you located yourself, not outside. Outside is the show. You were sitting separate. You came and sat in one character's head so that you could enjoy it. Don't become that character. It's one character. And don't be worried about why did I go into the head of this character or that. Couldn't I go to a richer person's head? Couldn't I go into a more healthy person's head? It doesn't matter. You are not that character anyway. You are neither the rich person, nor the poor person, nor the healthy person, nor the sick person. The character is. The body is. Not you. If you can sit inside and watch the drama, your life changes. It's just a practice. And it's so easy to do it. To imagine that you are sitting in the head should not be difficult. That's the first step. So if you can do that and remember that you are sitting in the head of a character, is your name what you have been called by? No. That's the name of your body. If you are called, don't answer. The body is to answer. Separate yourself from what is merely a cover upon yourself. It's like if I suppose calling my jacket myself, I'll be in trouble. Jacket will get dirty. I'll say, oh, I am dirty. I am not dirty. The jacket got dirty, I'll wash it. Change it. Not a big deal. Same thing is true of our body that we are wearing. And I am giving you a solution to so-called unhappiness. You become an observer in your head, a witness to the drama of life. And you will be happy all the time, no matter what the drama is, no matter what the highs and lows are. You will enjoy the show. We enjoy the show of highs and lows on the screen in a movie. We enjoy it on a theatre. Why not here? It's the same thing. To hold your attention there and realize who you are requires that you spend more time there. Not once for a moment you go there, then you become the character again. This is a little practice that you hold yourself there, reasonable time, every day, so it becomes natural for you. I have not the character. I am going to watch the show from inside, always feeling I am sitting on a chair, beautiful chair, watching life. You can do that. It will change your life. People ask me, why are you always happy? Somebody said, is some disease you have a problem? Is a disease that you are happy always? I mean, unhappiness is so much expected by people that they had to ask me this question once. My close friends were asking me, how come I've seen you for 30 years, always seen you happy? Something wrong with you? Some mentally wrong something? This is what we have treated ourselves with. You should be always happy. You should watch the show. You created, you directed. It's a wonderful show. You decided to come very close to it. You come very close, sat inside a character, enjoy it even more. Where's the problem? No, I wish I had picked up a better character. That is what brings me to that story I shared with you of Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote that wonderful book, Canterbury Tales. Canterbury Tales is a story. It's become a very important book in English literature. I did my Master of Arts exam in English literature, so I read a lot of stories and I liked that book a lot. Because that book is called the pioneer of novel, modern novel. Before that book came into being, about 300 years ago, a story was a story, not a novel. What's the difference? In a story, there was once upon a time a king, and he did this and he died. After that story of Geoffrey Chaucer, there was a very jealous king, a very generous king. A characterization of the actors came up. Therefore, it's considered to be a very important milestone in English literature. In the story, he talks of 40, 50 pilgrims going to Canterbury on a pilgrimage. And they are walking on foot, some are on horseback. And they're telling stories to each other, singing songs to each other, reciting poems, just to entertain each other on this long journey. So the whole book is full of those songs and stories and poems that they are reciting. It's very interesting how the characterization started. For example, they are describing an attorney, a lawyer, and the words are, a busier man there never was, that means never was, a busier man than he there never was, and yet he seemed busier than he was. He looks like a modern attorney. This kind of thing to describe was not there before in English literature. Or the wife of Bath is a town, wife of Bath, then she had marriages at court at 5. Without an other company in youth, I need not talk of that youth. So this kind of description that he gives characterizes each actor separately. The interesting part is that Chaucer says he was also one of the pilgrims. Now here the author of the whole book, and he decides to become one character. And he becomes one of the pilgrims. Everybody knows he's Chaucer the author. They even know who he is. In the middle of the journey, they asked Chaucer, come on, you give us some poem. He said, I don't know poetry. He's writing all the poems. And in the book he says, I don't know how poetry. No, we know. The others tell him, we know you are a good poet. Come on, give us some nice poem of yours. And he says, he gives a poem, the worst doggerel rhyme in the whole book. And they criticize him. Oh, we expected something better from you. How can an author get into a story and pick up a character where he's criticized by his own creation? His own characters are criticizing him. This has sometimes been compared the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Jesus said that he is Son of God, And he says, I and my Father are one. He is the creator of the universe. And he is crucified by the people who are his creation. Same thing. How can that happen? How did he not become the best possible human being and then give his talks? How could he get crucified by his own creation, yet be one with his Father? The answer in both cases is the same. Chaucer is not Chaucer in the character, he is all the characters. He just takes on that role himself, but that doesn't make any difference to Chaucer the author. Jesus is one with his Father. He is the creator of all, not the character called Jesus Christ. Therefore, he could get crucified and still be all. He was the crucified person, also the crucifier, also the whole drama. Therefore, when we realize that it doesn't matter at all what role you take, so long as you know you are the author of the whole thing. When you sit inside and realize the whole show is being created from within, outside, you are the author of the drama outside. It will never matter which head you got into. You are in all heads. And if you move further inwards and discover the truth about creation, you will find out you are actually everybody at that level. So therefore it doesn't matter. This kind of knowledge, this kind of awareness that comes to us through meditation is worthwhile. It makes your life happy right here. I call it a peripheral benefit. It's not the real benefit of teachings of great master, where you can discover everything. You can discover totality. If you have a perfect living master initiating you, you will get that highest realization and highest achievement of discovering who you are. Initiation by a perfect living master is not conditional. It is a guarantee that the master whose awareness is total right here, same master inside, same master is your own higher self, will definitely, without a doubt, take you to that totality, to your true home. If your seeking is for true home, you will first of all find a master, perfect living master, and it will be a guarantee to take you. Of course, the mind will play games. How can I be sure? I have doubts. Should I do more? Then he says, okay, validate with meditation. I say often that meditation is for the mind. We don't need it. The soul doesn't need it. Soul only needs love that pulls it. Period. Love is the only thing that pulls the soul. And love pulls the soul always. The mind has doubts. Even about this, the mind has doubt if you have a soul. The mind has doubt about everything. It was built into this apparatus called the mind to have doubts. Why was it built like this? Because it was a screening device. When we have this experience of this physical world, we are being pulled by people telling us they know the truth, which they don't know. There are more fake masters than real masters, several times more. Where a perfect living master comes, around that master, in that area, there are at least 11, 12 fake masters. Fake masters are there to keep the continuity of this universe, to keep going, so people can be pulled anywhere. Then what is it that helps us to not be following a fake master? Doubt, screening. Skepticism and doubt is a built-in system to screen. It was not supposed to be a bad thing. We are now calling doubt as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. The screening that takes place, and then the screening is taking place, and love is pulling us from a perfect living master, the screening stops on the way. So this is a very well-designed thing. It's a beautiful construction. If you look at how this universe is being created and sustained, It's the most beautiful show that you can ever imagine. Enjoy the show. Be part of the show and also enjoy the show. Thank you very much for joining me and telling all these stories today. I'll see you in the afternoon for a short while again at 3 o'clock. Thank you.